Hello and welcome to Spare Change News TV. My name is Sam Baltrusis. I'm the editor-in-chief of Spare Change News. Joining me today is Alex Ramirez. Welcome again on the show on Spare Change News TV. We have something exciting news to announce. Alex has been promoted to our online editor.
That's correct.
How does that feel going from a reporter to online editor of Spare Change News?
It feels awesome. I've been with the paper for a little more than a year now, and it's great to take a bigger role in it.
And the response has been fantastic. Alex's stories on Long Island probably are most talked about, most viewed stories. So speaking of sort of your beat covering the Long Island crisis, what are some of the latest developments regarding Long Island?
Well, I suppose the biggest development would be that it's 6 months and we still don't really have a proper replacement shelter. Southampton Shelter was constructed, or rather renovated, from an old transportation department building back in January. And it was supposed to have about 400 to 450 beds, and it still is only at 100. And they were supposed to add another 300 to it by April, but it got delayed. They found asbestos and I believe faulty wiring in the rest of the building. It's about a 3-floor building, and only 1 floor is really inhabitable.
So but basically we talked about this on another show that the mayor made a promise that there were going to be more beds in April, and that didn't happen.
Correct. That said, the city is still planning to add beds. It's just doing it at a much more staggered level. They're slated to add about 150 beds by May. I'm not 100% sure where the progress is on that. It was supposed to be about 66 beds, then another 80 or so.
So what about the detox beds? I mean, that's been a huge issue as well. Like there was, getting back, we talk about this pretty much every week, unfortunately, that on October 8th, Long Island Bridge closed, and the largest city-run shelter closed with it. So there have been replacement beds for the men, and there's also temporary shelters like you mentioned before. But what about the detox beds? In our last edition of Spare Change News, we actually talked about the rising opioid heroin crisis in Massachusetts. And so what are they doing about that? Well,
the detox beds that most people talk about would be Andrew House, which was a 60-bed facility. It was privately owned by Bay Cove. Chief Arroyo told a group of Boston Homeless Solidarity Committee members in an impromptu meeting earlier this month that Bay Cove was supposedly in talks with a hospital about opening one of the wings to be a detox bed. What the city owned for the most part were treatment and transitional beds, so also dealing with addiction recovery. And those beds, there are 250 of them. Only about 45 of them have been recovered. The city opened a new facility earlier this month in Mattapan, 45 beds for recovery and transitional patients, and another 30 beds for the Wyman Reentry Program, which is a reentry program for ex-convicts.
So someone that's been a journalist, so your job is to be objective. Getting beyond that, what are your personal thoughts on what's happened with Long Island?
My personal thoughts, I don't even know where to begin. I mean, it's a problem that's over a decade in the making. I think some people are, there's so many factors to it. To really talk about how this crisis started, you have to go back to all the fights with Quincy over the bridge, because Quincy just completely hated the bridge. They wanted it torn down for several reasons. Sometimes they would cite safety reasons or environmental concerns. But you also had a strong group that just wanted Long Island for recreational purposes.
Right.
When the bridge closed down, the reaction was not immediate. The only thing that was quick about the closing of Long Island Bridge was the closing itself. In 4 hours, everyone was kicked out of there. The city didn't seem to have a plan, and it was a new administration, so I think any, potential partnerships between the city and, non-municipal elements, those relationships just weren't there. That's been one concern of Boston Warm, for example.
Right.
A lot of them told me, we just don't know people in the city anymore. I think that there's a lot of bungling that happened, and some of it predates Mayor Walsh, but some of it is certainly just, you don't get the sense of urgency about this issue.
And we had the worst winter on record, and it was horrible for the homeless population. And this happened right before the snowiest winter on record. And from your perspective, do you feel like we haven't had any like directly reported deaths, but talking to the people, like how has their life changed since the closing of Long Island?
Right. I mean, I can't speak for everyone because so many people have had different experiences. I do know that it's been toughest for women. I do think that female homelessness, because if we were to be a little more objective about it, they do have lower numbers than male. There's, fewer homeless women, but there's still a much bigger population and a much different population than I think we often see them as. And so I think they've been hit the hardest. I certainly think that those in treatment, those who are in recovery, have also been hit the hardest. And I think when you just talk about the winter, we don't have solid numbers on those deaths, but we did see a spike in December, and a lot of it seemed to have been related to opiate overdoses, heroin overdoses was one of the headlines, but.
And Alex was one of the few publications, like other publications like The Globe, they did report on the crisis regarding Long Island, but your story actually talked about the deaths too, and like sort of like tying in. There was it the one in December that you wrote that talked about there's like 3. We're not sure if they were tied directly to Long Island, but there's people that died from overdoses. Yes,
and so. There was about 20 overdoses in Boston in December, and statewide, to kind of give you the sense of this crisis, not including Worcester, Springfield, and Boston, statewide there's been over 200 overdoses that are suspected of being heroin or opioid related.
Now, you covered the march this past week, was the Boston Homeless Solidarity Committee. They've been on our show, to the members, Cleve Ray and Cassie Hurd. And tell me about the march. It started at Woods Mullen, and then what happened at the march?
Yeah, so it started at Woods Mullen, across the street specifically, and it was about 40 to 50 people, I would guess. I'm not the best at eyeballing. And their goal was to march not just to the State House, but to stop at all the other facilities along the way, like Barbara McGinnis, St. Francis House. And their main goal was, I would say they had 2 main goals. One was to lobby for state involvement. It was something that they have been suggesting almost since the start of the crisis. Boston Homeless Solidarity Committee started within weeks after the closing, and that was one of their issues, was to get a state of emergency declared for this, to get the state cooperating with the city. And that march represented their really pushing, them saying, we have a vote of no confidence in the city. We want the state to step up and do something. They really called out Governor Baker, who in February said, I'm vowing to fight this crisis, this statewide crisis. And, we would certainly get a lot of help in fighting that crisis if we had more beds.
So just to reiterate, so they've gone from the city of Boston's not responding, so they're going state level to demand help. And Baker has a pretty strong track record in regards to helping the homeless, correct?
Correct, specifically family homelessness.
Right.
He's, when he was under the Weld administration, he did a lot of work there. One of his more laid out plans related to homelessness was about how to keep families out of motels, how to get them into housing faster.
Thank you for letting us speak. We stand in solidarity with you.
Gracias, thank you.
We're all human beings. Our value is in our humanity. Not in our income, not in our assets, but in our humanity. All we really want is to be treated with dignity and respect that should be accorded to us by our humanity. We can be shown that accord by housing us not in homeless shelters, but in real houses. We're happy to be able to speak to Governor Baker today, and we're happy to be able to stand in solidarity with all of you.
We need a caring support for the youth. Someone who will be there just to listen to their story. Tell them it's going to be all right. Get them in a safe place. Having youth scatter the streets is not good. Right now, there's probably tons of them over at Bridge right now getting ready for lunch. Some that are uncertain of where they're going to sleep tonight. Some of them who even live in the shelter are fighting every day, getting up to go to work and still not being able to afford a place to live.
There's no safe harbor. And I don't know what, the governor, he's going to, Charlie Baker's going to do about this. I know that Safe Harbor right now, I'm in touch with Stephanie from Safe Harbor, and they're in a room, first of all, with, no confidentiality. I hear it's just a split room up there, with one side is regular people, another side is like a couple of men, and isn't that like, what is it, HIPAA law or something like that? Yeah, HIPAA law, and it's not right, and they're not taking any women.
We're here to ask the governor today to open up all of those residential treatment programs on Long Island before more people die. That's why we're here today.
What do we need?
What do we need? Treatment. What do we need? Treatment. What do we need? Treatment. What do we need? Treatment.
It sounds like that they're pretty much, it's to the point of where it's a crisis.
Yes, I think they're very much, a lot of them would speak and say they've seen their friends die, they've heard about friends dying. That's pretty much been the mantra from probably late November to very recently, till the warm weather started peaking out. I think there are a lot of people who are still, worried what will happen. They're not taking that much comfort in the warm weather coming out. Because, let's face it, if we don't have a shelter by the end of the summer, we're going to be going through it all over again.
Yeah. What we just watched was so powerful, and it was a primitive demand and a cry for help. And if I feel like that no one's listening. And do you feel that as a reporter?
On a level, yes. I feel that no one's really listening to what the homeless themselves are saying. I think that there has been a general rise in empathy towards the homeless in the closing. I think a lot of people, at least on some general knowledge, if they know the basics of the shelter getting closed, they know that it's messed up, essentially. But I don't think they really know that the homeless, that their demands go beyond just reopening the bridge or getting another place to stay at night. I think that there's a lot deeper policy issues that really go to, economic, systemic issues. They want housing, they want these recovery beds. I think the recovery was something that kind of got pushed into the background a little bit, maybe because the numbers were smaller. But I think that there's, while I think people have started to take more notice, I think that there's still not an understanding. They're still not listening close enough or long enough to what these people have to say.
And I think that because Cleve was the gentleman that was speaking at the rally along with Sheree, I think that there is a lack of dignity that these people are treated. They're not treated with the dignity and respect. They're human beings. And, if you see the logistics of what happened on October 8th, they were put on barges and they were put into these really horrible conditions that some equate to being like in prison.
Yes, Cleve's mantra, which he kind of paraphrased there, was we need housing, not warehousing.
Yeah.
Because that's very much what a lot of these people feel like. They literally were in a warehouse their first night that Long Island was closed. The South End Fitness Center wasn't open until a day or two later. So they literally were warehoused, and then at South End Fitness, they're still, 6 inches away from each other at most in these cots. It's the same deal everywhere. A lot of the shelters on the mainland are trying their best to take in extra people, but it's not very sanitary. There really is a problem of dignity there.
And I also got from the videos the treatment of women, and you kind of touched upon the issue that women are kind of put on the same floor with people detoxing from alcohol. I mean, I've heard some horror stories, and the women are dealing with it. We talked about this before on Spare Change News TV, but women are dealing with safety issues and whether or not they feel safe. Some of them are getting out of an abusive relationship. Some of them have PTSD. There's a lot of issues that women face that the men don't have to deal with, and they're putting in situations where their safety is jeopardized. And I feel like that we really need to look at this as a community. And the private sector has stepped up, and you've written stories on the private sector stepping up. But that's not the private sector's place. It is the city's place to take care of the poor.
Exactly. I couldn't say it any better. And I think most of the activists just have been reiterating that point. They're asking the city to really stand up and take its responsibility, and now they're asking the state to stand up and take responsibility too. Now
that you're moving over to our online editor, and it's important that we are Spare Change News. We're journalists and we're trained journalists, but there's a fine line of kind of crossing over to the advocacy journalism. And I feel like that Spare Change News is sort of kind of giving a voice to the advocacy movement.
Yeah, I've always felt that we're in this weird place. We're almost like some of the alternative papers around town, where I think we definitely, from the start, we're going to have a different stance, but that doesn't mean that we don't employ good journalism, that we're not being logical and objective. But I think that, our truth should be what helps the homeless more, what helps the oppressed the most. And again, we don't need to stretch the truth to do that. It's just that I think we have a clear mission.
No, we are going to you were the first guest on Spare Change News TV, so we've had several episodes since then. We are up for an INSP award, which is the International Street Paper Association. It's a big deal. So this is an international award. If Spare Change News TV wins the award, it would be fantastic for the show and for the paper. So we're going to actually play our 5 most memorable moments from the show. Hi, I'm Sam Valtrusis, Editor-in-Chief of Spare Change News. Joining me today is Andrew Warburton.
Hello.
He is our last word columnist. He's also our copy editor. First of all, I want to thank INSP for considering Spare Change News TV for a Best Non-Paper Project. We're putting our 5 most memorable moments together for INSP. So Andy, so tell me about your experience with Spare Change News TV.
Well, I started working for the newspaper when you did, so you brought me in because we've done a lot of work together in the past. So every 2 weeks I've been meeting with the vendors and interviewing them. They've been telling me, about some of their life, and so I put together a little article on the back page, and it's just been, it's been an amazing experience.
And as we talked about on Spare Change News TV, Andy has a different approach when he does his vendor profiles. He talks about their hopes and their dreams. He doesn't really focus on how did you become homeless. So the vendors are becoming stars. I mean, people are really learning about the vendors and their wisdom that they have to offer to the community. So it's been a fantastic journey. My first episode, I had no idea what I was doing. I had Alex Ramirez, who is one of our star reporters, come on the show, and it was a pretty emotional first episode. It's still our most viewed episode, which was the beginning. The reason why I joined Spare Change News was I reached out to one of the religious leaders of Boston, and I said, what can I do? Because I feel emotionally invested in these people. And she said, pray. And I did. And so I prayed, and actually someone emailed me with a job at Spare Change News, and my life has kind of changed since then. We focused Alja Benjamin, and you've actually interviewed Alja.
Yeah.
And we actually saw a clip from the early 90s of Alja talking, and we we were shocked because he looked like a model, and so we really liked. It was a fantastic interview.
He's very well known in this Spare Change News community because he's been around for so long. The nice thing about Alja is that he does like to talk, and like he said, the people in the street say that he sometimes feels like a street psychologist.
Yeah.
And you really get that from him. I feel like I could talk to him. And when we went to Dunkin' Donuts and had coffee, which is another nice thing, rather than, although the vendor meeting is great, it's kind of nice to go out for coffee as well.
Yeah.
But he really liked to talk, and it went on for way longer than I expected. Because originally the vendor profiles were supposed to be like one-word answers, right?
Right, that was our original intention, but then they kind of molded into something else. So,
and that's because of Alja.
You were on that episode. I interviewed Amanda and Michelle Gomez, and we talked about tampons, and it was the most awkward conversation, but it was a necessary conversation. In the story, you actually you did talk about that it could be a trigger, and of course, like this topic. When I was reading, I was editing this story. I'm like, I don't really know much about this topic, but it's important to be candid, and
right.
and I appreciate your candidness doing the story, because it's not an easy story to do.
Yeah. So it wasn't. It's very uncomfortable. You make a lot of uncomfortable phone calls. I'm talking about periods. You know, can you help me with that? And it is uncomfortable, but I mean, it's kind of it's necessary, so I don't mind it. You know?
We actually had a documentary debut on Spare Change News TV. It was called No Room at the Inn. It was a documentary that was created by Diane Smith, who was a student at Harvard, and it was very, very powerful. It was a nice juxtaposition of what Andy does. Andy has sort of a third place spot where he interviews homeless people and the vendors, and some of them are homeless, some of them are not homeless.
Whereas she goes out into the street and actually meets with them where they are in the street, so it's quite different, but it's very powerful.
She was able to actually capture the emotion on their faces with a high-def camera.
Yeah.
Now, with the questions now, a little bit, she asked questions like, how did you become homeless? Now, you don't ask those types of questions. Like, do you try not to ask those questions when you do interviews? He writes the last word column, which is on the last page of Spare Change News.
What she's doing is similar to what I've been doing, interviewing the vendors, but I think that she's really meeting homeless people where they're at, but in the street, basically. So you can even hear all those street noises in the background.
Yeah.
So I think that what I've been doing is meeting people in quite a private situation. So I think that gives them the time to sort of really kind of open up quite a lot. I think it would be difficult to like go into the street and interview people and try to, find out a lot about their life in that kind of environment.
Well, Diane was really, when she submitted the documentary for Spare Change News TV, she was really adamant about us keeping those noises, because that is the reality of what they live in. And you had one gentleman who was a veteran and possibly could have PTSD. I cried on live TV. Yes, I did. Andy and I are friends, so he knows how to push my buttons, and I started crying. Was it bad?
No, it was just like perfect, very representative of Sam. He gets very involved in what he's doing, which is it makes him a very good editor for the newspaper.
I do. I care about the people that I talk to.
By asking me how it had changed my life, but I feel like it's changed your life.
It really has changed my life. I think that like with John, I'll tell you the truth. The truth is, I care about these people so much, and when it's snowing and I know that they're out there, I don't know what's going to happen to them. Our honorable mention is when Alton, who you interviewed in the last word, Alton is wheelchair bound. He, when he was ready to appear on the show, miraculously got out of his wheelchair and walked to the set. So I was a little shocked, but it turns out that Alton can walk at some point, but just not in
But Sam didn't realize that.
I didn't realize that. I was surprised.
It's a miracle. Joining
me for the last few minutes is Alton. He's one of our vendors. Welcome to the show, Alton.
Welcome to you.
So Alton was taking a little bit of a nap earlier. So he was busy working out in the streets selling Spare Change News. So Alton, tell me, how did you join Spare Change News?
I joined Spare Change News for a friend of mine. I didn't know anything about it until she told me.
Okay.
So I went down and I saw, I was panhandling up until then. So I went down and I said, okay. And I said, gee, this is easy. I don't make as much money, but hey, at least I'm doing something and I'm feeling good about what I'm doing.
So thank you, INSP, and I hope that we have many more episodes of Spare Change News TV in the future. Welcome back to Spare Change News TV. So Alex Ramirez, any closing thoughts on and your new role as online editor of Spare Change News?
I'm just looking forward to what adventure that's going to be, and I look forward to sharing our content as part of Spare Change News and really just helping. I think seeing all that talk about speaking with our vendors and stuff, not just sharing our content, our journalist content, but really putting our vendors and their peers in homelessness out there and really helping those issues get known in any way that I can.
Thank you, Alex. And yeah, I definitely feel like that Spare Change News leads the way in regards to integrating the vendors and having them share their experience, strength, and hope to not only in the paper but also on the TV show. So this has been a great vehicle, not only for us but for them as well. So again, if you want more information on Spare Change News, go to sparechangenews.net. We also have Facebook and then Twitter, what is our Twitter accounts?
At Spare Change News.
At Spare Change News. It's pretty easy there. So again, Alex, so if in regards to, are you doing any live feeds or anything coming up soon that you want to talk about, or stories that you're working on that's coming up in the new issue?
Right. Well, I'm going to be exploring youth homelessness. There's a homeless shelter that will be open in Cambridge, but there's going to be a lot of struggle until that place actually opens. And even in Boston proper, there's only Bridge Over Troubled Water, which is just a 12-bed shelter.
In our next edition of Spare Change News, we are going to announce our cover story is Jimmy Tingle.